Welcome, fellow travelers. From many roads you have arrived. Weary though you may be, I invite you to sit back and consider the menu of selections before you today. This is the Unitarian Universalist Cafe, and I am your waiter. This cafe where each week we serve a wee bit of knowledge with your coffee, when we have coffee, that is. After all, post-pandemic, sometimes challenging to invite people to host social hours. Thank you, Chuck. And Katie, thank you both. Your your service leaders and speakers work hard to prepare a menu for you each week. I hope when you join us, you will find something to feed that hunger of yours. For breakfast, you might order a bagel with a smear of Rumi, or a baked croissant with a side of Christianity. For lunch, we offer delectable sandwiches. For example, from the vast menu, you might order a pagan peanut butter and Jewish jam sandwich. For dinner, we provide you with three choices: a tuna casserole, a slice of lasanga, Buddhist, with a salad or a bowl of agnostic soup. To end your meal with a dessert, we serve creme brulee in a flaming chalice with a pinch of salt and a drizzle of reason. All of these items are served on humanist dishes made of clay gathered by Confucius, formed by the hands of Greek philosophers, glazed by the ethical culture movement of 1876. Not familiar with that glaze? The ethical movement formally began in America in 1876 when Felix Adler, a rabbi's son, founded the Society for Ethical Culture in New York. So Unitarian Universalism, both movements were here in the United States by 1876. Its focus, this ethical culture in New York, was on living rich and moral lives without reference to religious doctrines or supernatural beliefs, and was the beginning of organized humanism that we know about today. I hope you chuckled a time or two. For longtime members, you get it. You know what I'm talking about. A little sprinkle of this here, a little bit of that. But maybe newcomers are like, what are you talking about, humanist dishes? All of this is served up on dishes where we endeavor to make a difference no matter whether we consider ourselves secular or religious humanists. Our work, regardless of Judaism, Christianity, atheism, agnosticism, is making the world a better place. This is how, week after week, we feed one another on a diet that is as diverse as the galaxies we are viewing on the James Webb Telescope. Let's pivot now and reflect on an excerpt by a poem by Walt Whitman titled Song of the Open Road. Afoot and lighthearted I take to the open road, healthy, free, the world before me, the long brown path before me leading wherever I choose. Henceforth I ask not good fortune, I myself am good fortune. Henceforth I whimper no more, postpone no more, need nothing. Done with indoor complaints, libraries, querulous criticism, strong and content, I travel the open road. You, road I enter upon and look around. I believe you are not all that is here. I believe much is still unseen. And that is also here. Waltman acknowledged the open road, a path where all persons can move together, seeking the deeper meaning of life. Maybe looking for what isn't revealed at first glance. All persons will travel the road. There will be no status or social marker. It is available to all, and its travelers will move with one another. Although one may stop briefly to perhaps sit a while indoors, one will not remain there, but will embark once again on a path leading to new experiences, fresh perspectives, and freedom of thought. Unitarian Universalism is thought of as a breathing, changing movement, has always been, and part of that is for learning new perspectives and having freedom of thought. It's been said we might be a denomination, but we really are a movement. This morning we will explore the path, the inspiration that emerged from humanism. When we're finished today, I hope you will see how it has been as much of an influence on our Unitarian Universalist movement as all other major influences, including 1893, the World's Parliament of Religions event in Chicago, where both Unitarians and Universalists were forced to consider exactly how much they would affirm persons adhering to other traditions or no traditional creeds. This was a major moment in our history. You see, that year at the large gathering, clergy from mainline Christian institutions were there, rabbis from Jewish congregations, imams from the Islamic community, Hindus, Buddhists, and more came from overseas and across the world to represent those traditions. Never in the history of the U.S. had there arrived so many representations expressing such diversity. On that occasion, the Unitarians had to confront this question: will we find acceptable people who worship multiple gods? Unitarian meaning one God. The Universalists encountered this question: would the Buddhists who adopt the idea of reincarnation rather than heaven upon death, would they be affirmed? Those were serious concerns for the time. They had a profound influence on our Unitarian Universalist faith as expressed today. A few years later, so that was 1893, in 1941, a new organization formed. It was the American Humanist Association. Many Unitarian Universalists increasingly focused on the use of reason and the results of science. This, too, had a profound effect on our tradition. Marlo Thomas was once interviewed about her not-for-profit foundation that raises money to fight cancer. She spoke of a child who recovered from the dreaded disease, the foundation that she speaks for and supports to fight cancer. The interviewer said, "That's a miracle that the child recovered." And Marlo Thomas said, "No, that's science." There are two major categories of humanists. There are secular, which is partly what Lori was reading the book, secular. And then there are spiritual humanists, religious or spiritual humanists. Secular humanists prefer to keep the topic of religion out of the conversation, whereby religious or spiritual humanists practice their humanist belief within a religious tradition with a keen interest on serving the needs of community. When I said it's served on plates, there you are. It is focusing on, it's all our justice work, it's all the work we do in the name of love. It is to assist and benefit humanity, folks living today, in the present time, in the here and now. So there's much gray area between the two flavors of humanists, but these are the most common shades of humanism. The educator, atheist, humanist, and friend to Unitarianism, John Dewey, wrote a little book titled A Common Faith. In it, he described humanism as religious in this way. Quote, "The sense of dignity of human nature is as religious as the sense of awe and reverence when it rests upon a sense of human nature as a cooperating part of a larger whole. Understanding and knowledge also enter into a perspective that is religious in quality. Faith in the continued disclosing of truth, directed, cooperative human endeavor is more religious in quality than is any faith in completed revelation. Any activity pursued on behalf of an ideal end against obstacles and in spite of threats of personal loss because of conviction of its general enduring value is religious in quality. So, what is the history of humanism? The educator. So, Jeremy, I keep hearing it come in and out. Is it just me? You're working on, okay. The educator, editor, politician, and philosopher Confucius, born in China around 551 before the Common Era, promoted the virtues of the self, sincerity, and cultivation of knowledge. We also find humanist thought emerging from ancient Greece when power was transferred to everyday people. That is, when the seeds of democracy were sown. Humanist thought has appeared through the years thereafter in almost every field of human endeavor, including works born of humanist authors, artists, and theologians. The Renaissance in Europe, for example, during the 14th through the 17th centuries, was a pinnacle moment where strong intellectual humanist understanding surfaced powerfully and subsequently led to the Age of Enlightenment. 1650 to 1800, if you're wondering the years. The humanist movement rode the seas to the New World and became the dominant voice in the Declaration of Independence. More formal construction of humanism emerged after major developments. For example, the late 19th and 20th century was a time of powerful change in numerous areas. So I'm going to say a date and something that happened. I will go slow here. 1848, Karl Marx published the Communist Manifesto. 1850, realism was the style most dominant in the arts. No more of the images of Mary and the Annunciation. You'll see more paintings of woodlands. 1859, Charles Darwin published Origin of the Species. 1868, the typewriter was invented. 1871, Darwin published The Descent of Man. 1872, the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche published The Birth of Tragedy, promoting freedom of thought. His many works were both controversial and popular. I know there are a lot of Nietzsche fans in this room and on Zoom. There were major discoveries in science and medicine, areas whereas God had traditionally reigned supreme. 1898, the Curies discovered that radium gives off waves of radiation. 1905, Einstein published the theory of relativity. 1928, the iron lung kept some people alive. Penicillin was invented, and the jet engine was patented. Influencing still more areas of importance, French philosopher Paul Ricoeur, who was born in 1913 and died in 2005, developed a form of deconstructive criticism called hermeneutics of suspension. This is what I learned and the method of looking at sacred text in my seminary. It has had far-reaching ramifications even today in the study of biblical texts, whereby meaning is both revealed and concealed. The questions, who am I and how am I supposed to live, now have entirely new answers. Rather than espousing creedal answers promoted by individuals in the past, academic culture in Europe and here was and is heavily influenced by Ricoeur and philosophers in the past such as Aristotle, Nietzsche, Kant, Hegel, and Heidegger. So this emphasis soon moved to theological understanding. that is, speculative thought regarding the study of the nature of our human species, rather than having a focus on theological understanding, whereby the focus was on the study of the nature of God. Do you see that twist and that change? Shortly before this period, and a few years before the first Humanist Manifesto that was created in 1933, there was a major controversy within Unitarian Universalism. So Unitarians and Universalists came together in 1961. I will talk more about the Humanist Manifesto, the 3 versions, at a date in November, yet to be announced. But what we want to know about is the humanist theist controversy, launched around 1921 by 2 individuals. John Dietrich, a Reformed church minister who was defrocked by that denomination in 1911. So we were very Christian in 1911, both of our denominations, Unitarians and Universalists. He was charged with heresy for denying, quote, the infallibility of the Bible and the deity of Christ. So many of us believe that Jesus was a prophet, a great teacher, one to be honored for sure, but questionable about a God in himself. Jesus had a piece of the divine, so our modern Christianity, many of our Christians in our meeting houses would say, each of us has the spark of divine, but that we are very much like Jesus, walking about the world trying to make a difference. By the way, any history on Jesus the man, you will find incredible cultural adverse young man. So, Walter Mason, the Unitarian minister in Pittsburgh, was very supportive of Dietrich, and months later, Dietrich was given fellowship as a Unitarian minister and was called to serve the Unitarian Society in Spokane, Washington. Dietrich began to espouse humanism in 1915 and 16. He publicly proclaimed that the scientific method was the only true authority. That was radical for the times. Especially in our 2 denominations. Dietrich moved to Minnesota and became minister of the First Unitarian Society in Minneapolis. So Dietrich published an article in the Christian Register in 1919 titled The Outlook for Religion, which launched the humanist theist controversy. So when people say to you, where do you go on a Sunday morning, and you say Unitarian Universalists of Clearwater, they'll say, but you all worship God, right? And you can respond, we each may have a differing belief, but we speak of all that has worth, which was the earliest definition for worship. Remember, the Christian ritual of communion was still observed in our Unitarian churches. 2 years before the article, Dietrich met Curtis Reese at the Western Unitarian Conference meeting, and the 2 realized they'd been preaching humanism all along. So let's be clear. Dietrich, who is considered the father of humanism and an original signer of the first Humanist Manifesto, was, quote, never one who denied God, but he thought of himself as open-minded to the idea. He could never affirm theism, though, which for him meant a guiding intelligence working out some definite purpose. At the end of his life, he tried to find a synthesis between humanism and theism, a belief in the divine or supernatural other. But he always maintained that it was impossible to define God. He died in 1957. Curtis Reese, another original signer of the first Humanist Manifesto and an outstanding leader in the humanist movement within Unitarianism, was born in 1887 in North Carolina. He came from a long line of Baptist preachers, and after completing study at a Baptist college at Mars Hill in North Carolina, served a church in Alabama and 2 in Kentucky. So Reese came across Unitarian minister in Kentucky and became increasingly unable to accept his Baptist faith. Many of you have come from a history of Christian traditions or Catholic traditions. You know how hard it is to grow into a new understanding and to step away from a tradition that you grew up with. We have the same story in the past. He went back to school, went to see the Unitarian minister Francis Greenwood Peabody in Toledo, Ohio, and professed his faith in a statement that follows. He said, quote, "A universal Father, God, a universal brotherhood, mankind, a universal right, freedom, a universal aim, progress." Reese entered Unitarian ministry in Alton, Illinois in 1913 and moved to Des Moines in 1915. So his part in the humanist theist controversy arose when he gave an address at Harvard Summer School in 1920 titled "Content of Present-Day Religious Liberalism." He stated, historically, the basic content of religious liberalism is spiritual freedom. Out of the basic content has come the conviction of the supremacy of reason, the primary worth of character, and the immediate access of man to spiritual sources. Today, within our Unitarian Universalist ranks, many identify as humanists who adhere to the idea that the question of the existence of God or gods should not enter the conversation regarding the utmost concern for humanity. There are still Unitarian Universalists, more of them, who say they have a humanist perspective on life and still adhere to a relationship with a divine mystery. So when your key focus is on doing good for others, that is, creating more justice within this lifetime, you are at the very least leaning toward a humanist point of view. And since Unitarian Universalists of Clearwater agree that our beloved congregation is not about being an I congregation, I come here because I believe we should be talking about God. I come here because there are humanists here and we don't talk about God. That is not who we are. We are aspiring to be a we congregation. And I'm bringing this up because someone recently said, how can you be a you if you're Christian? We are humanists. Someone said that. This would be false, a false narrative for who we are. The vision here at UUC is, quote, to create an inclusive religious community, a beacon for reason, meaning, and bold social action. The mission here at UUC is to, quote, celebrate dignity and respect for all, nurture lifelong spiritual growth, act for justice and equality, and serve the wider community in all ahead who may or may not think like you. There's no place for people to tell another person they do or do not belong based on their personal beliefs. We at Unitarian Universalists of Clearwater affirm the path that is spiritual, however that may look to you. And at the same time, we aspire to work for justice. Do I hear an amen? Amen. Do I hear a may it be so? Yes. Thank you so much.